Tonight, extreme temperatures hit parts of the U.S.
Heat exhaustion, heat stroke are real, and they're very dangerous.
The latest on the hot weather here at home and abroad. Plus, President Biden's plan to fight climate change. And from faith.
That's not the Christianity that I grew up believing.
To failures of government.
Investigation continues.
A CBN News exclusive with Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. All this and more on tonight's Faith Nation.
High heat wreaking havoc here at home and around the world. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
In Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. Wildfires, health issues, and power blackouts. Those are just some of the concerns associated with wild weather, especially in communities ill-equipped to handle the heat.
With record-breaking temperatures raging through Europe and parts of the United States, experts warn the heat wave will continue. CBN's Brody Carter has been tracking it all and joins us now. Brody, what are our friends across the pond saying about this record-breaking heat?
Well, Caitlin, John, hotter than the Sahara. Also, Britain is melting. Those are just some of the top headlines in London during this week's extreme heat. The thermometer topping 40 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, the hottest ever in Britain.
There is sweat running down everybody's backs.
Water fountains transformed into wading pools, with overheated Europeans desperate for relief.
It's always too hot. It's too hot.
In the UK, where air conditioning is often a luxury and homes are built to retain heat, many of those venturing outside sought refuge where they could.
It is just as hot outside as it is inside.
CBN producer Gabe LaMonica on vacation with family in London.
One thing we did is we ducked into some of the places we know have AC. So it's been pretty hot, and there's, kind of fans blowing on the double-decker buses, but as you can see from that picture of us with Julie, she was pretty hot.
London's Luton Airport literally melting as it shut a runway due to the melted tarmac. The dangerous heat intensified wildfires throughout much of Europe. In France, more than 37,000 people evacuating their homes since last week, roughly 5,000 evacuations in Greece. Across Europe, 1,500 heat-related deaths.
The extreme heat we're forecasting right now is absolutely unprecedented.
Now the U.S. is bracing, with more than 100 million Americans under heat alerts nationwide.
Stay out of the sun because it's hot.
Texas wildfires have already scorched some 8,000 acres. Nearly the entire state is feeling triple-digit temps. Out east, New York City is under a heat wave expected to last through the weekend.
Britain did catch a break with evening thunderstorms. The high today dropped back down into the 70s. This is parts of the U.S. braced to see if the power grid can withstand the oncoming heat. Caitlin, John?
Brody, as temperatures rise, one concern now and for the rest of the summer is the threat of power blackouts. Brody, is there anything people can do practically to help prevent those ahead of the next heat wave?
Yeah, John, this is a real concern, especially in larger metropolitan cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Houston, places where residents are being asked to conserve energy and to avoid those outages. Now, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, that is, warns that a hotter than usual summer will cause power failures throughout most of the western U.S. People can protect themselves by not running the air conditioner when they're home. When they're not home, that is. Don't cool any rooms that you're not using. And when you're using washing machines and dishwashers, try and use those in the early morning or the late night when the power grid is not in high demand. The conversation surrounding energy is heating up as summer temperatures do just that.
If the administration in Washington had a change of heart right at this moment and decided, you know what, we're going to build in redundancies so that we have affordable, reliable energy, at least as a backup, so that Americans don't lose power, it could take years to get back to that point, to build the plants needed and to get the wires needed because of the slow dismantling that they have done of the electric grid in the name of their ideology.
And obviously, if you're out and about, stay hydrated, take breaks in the shade, and maybe seek out a public space with some air conditioning. John, Caitlin?
Thanks, Brody. Now, we are a nation facing, quote, clear and present danger. That was the message President Biden had today for Americans. That danger, he says, is climate change.
Extreme weather disrupts supply chains, causing delays and shortages for consumers and businesses. Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world. So my message today is this: since Congress is not acting as it should, and these guys here are, but we're not getting many Republican votes, this is an emergency, and I will look at it that way.
The president vowed to use executive action to fight climate change, including $2.3 billion in FEMA funding to build infrastructure to help in extreme weather situations.
Well, on Capitol Hill, the January 6th Select Committee is gearing up for another primetime hearing, presenting new testimony about former President Donald Trump's actions leading up to and the day of the Capitol riot.
Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger is expected to help lead what is currently on the schedule as the final hearing. Matt Galka spoke with him about what to expect tomorrow and how he's leaned on his faith during this turbulent time. Matt joins us now from the Capitol. Matt?
Well, the congressman had previously said he relied on his faith, and it guided him when he voted to impeach former President Donald Trump. He says he's relying on it now more than ever as the backlash increases for him continuing to sit on the January 6th committee.
The allegation of a stolen election was a lie.
As one of only 2 Republicans on the January 6th Select Committee, Kinzinger is expected to take the lead Thursday evening. The Illinois congressman says sticking to one of his core principles, country over party, has led to tremendous criticism and tested him.
It can be confusing faith-wise. It's like, how come there's only a few of us speaking out like this? But I do in my prayer times and in my kind of quiet time, I look at it and I go, yeah, there are moments in the Bible where there's discussions about standing alone, and it kind of feels like that at this moment. It's a recommitment to truth. And I know this much. I know that, Jesus Christ is not sitting around really angry that Donald Trump isn't president again.
Kinzinger's actions have made him the enemy of Donald Trump's most loyal supporters. His office released just a few of the threats they've received since the committee started.
I hope somebody like him kills your nasty mom or your nasty wife. It's not a threat, it's a hope.
Wrath of the Lord God Almighty come upon you, your health, your family, your home, your livelihood. And I pray, if it be God's will, that you suffer.
It's like, what is happening to Christianity? How is it that, how do we expect anybody to ever turn to the Christian faith again? And I ask people this all the time. Do you think somebody who was not a Christian was more likely to become a Christian before Donald Trump or after? Some people will say after. I happen to very much disagree because we look angry, hateful, and that's not the Christianity that I grew up believing.
Despite the threats, Kinzinger is following through with the January 6th investigation, with hearings that have already yielded explosive allegations.
The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel.
The retiring congressman says Thursday's hearing will focus on what he calls Trump's inaction for more than 3 hours, as many of his supporters entered the Capitol.
187 minutes, which is during the actual time between when the president, in essence, the 187 minutes he didn't tweet, sitting in the White House watching this go down. So we'll have details on that. But the investigation continues. And obviously, we're interested in hearing again from Secret Service members.
And Representative Kinzinger is expected to lead tomorrow's hearing with Virginia Democrat Elaine Luria. Both are military veterans. Guys.
Matt, what is the committee hoping to reveal in the next hearing?
Well, there are going to be a lot of storylines to watch for. As you just heard from Congressman Kinzinger, they're going to talk about that 187 minutes. He said they're going to try to go minute by minute during that 3-hour or so window that President Trump wasn't tweeting while the January 6th riot was going on. There's also other storylines to watch for. The chairman of the committee, Democrat Benny Thompson, he recently tested positive for COVID. He will not be there in person, but he could be chairing that committee virtually. As for some new witnesses, we were promised to hear from new witnesses. We will be hearing from Sarah Matthews and Matthew Pottinger. Both of them were White House aides on January 6th, and they quickly resigned soon after. Now, even though this is the last scheduled committee hearing, Adam Kinzinger told me that there could be more on the horizon as they continue to receive more information. Guys, back to you.
Matt Galka with that exclusive interview. Thank you so much, Matt. Well, elsewhere on Capitol Hill, an emotional plea today for more aid to Ukraine. Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelenska is in Washington this week meeting with lawmakers. On the House floor today, she asked for more help in her country's fight against the deadly Russian invasion.
I am asking for weapons that would not be used to wage a war on somebody else's land, but to protect one's home and the right to wake up alive in that home. I'm asking for air defense systems in order for rockets not to kill children in their strollers.
The First Lady highlighted the plight of innocent civilians, specifically children, whom she says have been killed by Russian missile strikes. Zelenska also says she's not just speaking as First Lady, but as a mother who simply wants to be able to tell her children they'll be safe while they sleep.
The 2022 midterm elections, results for Tuesday's primary and more, next on Faith Nation.
And welcome back. A candidate backed by former President Donald Trump has won the GOP primary in Maryland's governor's race. Dan Cox, a Trump loyalist, will continue campaigning on a platform of protecting life, liberty, and freedom from government overreach. He beat out former Maryland Commerce Secretary Kelly Schultz, who'd been backed by the current Republican governor, Larry Hogan. On the Democratic side, former combat vet and best-selling author Wes Moore is leading as of now, followed closely by former Labor Secretary, that is, Tom Perez. The race is still too close to call, as mail-in and provisional ballots are still being counted.
Here with us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, Maryland is seen as a reliably Democratic state, with a few exceptions like outgoing Governor Larry Hogan. Did former President Trump's endorsement of Dan Cox help or hurt Republicans' chances of keeping the governor's mansion in November?
Well, it certainly helped Cox get through the primary, and also Cox had help from the Democratic side because Democrats spent a few $1 million trying to get Cox through the primary because they felt like he was the weaker nominee, and that's what happened. And now you have Cox, who has been loyal to President Trump, but in a state where President Trump received 32% of the vote in 2020. So as Democrats continue to seek to tie him to the former president, I think that's going to hurt his chances. I think that Republicans are going to have a good year or a good set of elections in November, but going from 32% to 50% for a Republican that's not named Larry Hogan is going to be difficult for Republicans to pull that off.
Turning to the Southwest, Nathan, Arizona is shaping up to be a test of who holds the most sway over the Republican Party. Mike Pence has endorsed a candidate for governor that puts him at direct odds with former President Trump. We saw a similar split in the Georgia primary with Kemp versus Perdue in the governor's race. What do you anticipate this time around, Nathan?
Well, the Georgia case is a little bit different because there was an incumbent governor, right, Brian Kemp, and it's difficult to beat incumbents in a primary. In this Arizona race, there's no incumbent on either side. Governor Ducey can't run for re-election. So you have former Vice President Mike Pence lining up behind Karen Taylor Robeson, and then President Trump lining up behind Kari Lake, a former local news anchor. One of the interesting developments in this is, though, over the last 24 hours, there was a social media post that came out from Kari Lake back in 2017, right before President Trump's inauguration, saying that she was anti-Trump. And so it will be interesting to see not only how primary voters react to that, but how does President Trump react to that based on some news that he probably didn't know before endorsing her in this race.
The Select Committee investigating the Capitol attack holds what's currently on the schedule as the final public hearing tomorrow. Meanwhile, more than a dozen senators, Republicans and Democrats, have come up with legislation to avoid another January 6th. Did revelations from the committee play a role in this bill, and do you think it'll pass?
It's tough to separate out individual elements. I think it has to be in some of those members' minds as they look at this. I actually think the Electoral Count Reform Act, I think it's going to pass. I believe it has 8 Republican co-sponsors. They probably need to get 10 total 10 Republicans along with all the Democrats for it to pass. So I think they'll get there. Remember that gun bill that passed? It was based on Republicans who were either not seeking re-election at all or not up for re-election this time, and they got that across the line. So I think this will I think this will pass, but we also have to remember, I don't know that this means we're not going to have another mess on January 6th, because we could have in 2024 state legislatures who give themselves the power to choose electors that may not line up with how their state voted. And that could be a whole other set of issues that we face in the next presidential race.
To another topic real quickly here, Nathan. There is some opposition from some Republicans, but it looks like there's enough bipartisan support to codify same-sex marriage, bypassing the Senate filibuster in the next 30 seconds or so. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, I know it's weird. I think this is going to pass as well. We've talked so many times about legislation not passing this Congress, but 47 Republicans in the House signed on to, voted for the bill. I think that it's going to get across the line in the Senate as well. And what's interesting in this election is that you have Democrats hoping to run on social issues, Republicans hoping to run on economic issues. That hasn't always been the case in our elections. But I expect this to pass and be signed by the president, and we'll see how Republicans and the voters react in November.
All right, editor and publisher of Inside Elections, Nathan Gonzalez. Thanks so much, Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks.
Help during a humanitarian crisis. How one Russian athlete is giving back to Ukrainians displaced by his country's invasion. The average price for a gallon of gas finally falling below $4.50. According to AAA, drivers can expect an average gallon to cost $4.46. That's down about 45 cents from a month ago. But compared to this time last year, gas prices are still surging. Back then, the average price for a gallon was $3.16.
Some relief, finally. You know, Caitlin, it's probably something we don't think about often. I know I don't think about it, but 1/3 of every bite we take at the dinner table is made possible by the pollination of honeybees. They're crucial to our food supply.
And that makes the growing trend of backyard beekeeping much more than just a hobby. Mark Martin explains.
There's probably about 1,500 bees on this particular frame.
Virginia master beekeeper Haji Holgerson began this work close to 60 years ago after reading a book on honeybees in elementary school.
I probably spend more time doing this than I do my day job. Don't tell my boss, but anyway.
Today he cares for about 100 hives and is a member of the Tidewater Beekeepers Association.
To educate not only beekeepers, but the non-beekeeping public. And educating the non-beekeeping public is a daunting task because most people are afraid of honeybees.
If you're a backyard beekeeper, this is what you want to see. A healthy colony has a nice oval pattern with young, undeveloped bees covering about 75% of the frame, the rest being pollen and honey. And while delicious honey is a good reason to keep bees around, Holgerson says their main contribution is pollination.
Virginia's #1 economy is agriculture. Virginia farmers raise 100 different commercially grown crops that they would not be able to raise if it wasn't for a simple bug. That kind of puts things in perspective.
Keith Tignor echoes that importance, pointing to the bees' role in producing the quantities of our fruits, vegetables, and nuts we have today.
It's been estimated that 1/3 of every bite we take at the dinner table is attributed to pollination by the honeybee. Without honeybees, the cost of food is going to continue to increase. The availability of food is going to decrease. And so it's extremely critical to maintain a healthy honeybee population for that pollination.
In Massachusetts, 6th-generation beekeeper Ken Warchall has strived to maintain healthy bees for nearly 70 years.
There's nothing better I love to do than to go into a beehive. It's so rewarding, so refreshing, so relaxing.
Ken describes this hive as being very healthy, but the odds are stacked against honeybees. He says on average each year he sees 20 to 25% losses. And believe it or not, for a beekeeper, that's a good percentage.
Here in the United States, it rings between 35 and 60%, depending what areas. The northern latitudes, a little more, because down south they can raise brood all year round. Up here, they cut their brood rearing off in November and start up in January. And so it's many more losses up here than down south, more like 30, 35% down south, more like 50 to 60% up here.
We have an annual loss of approximately 30%. That's each winter we anticipate that we're going to lose 1/3 of our population. Virginia is not alone in the loss of bees. Some locations are even greater losses than us. Some are doing a little bit better. But overall, this is a problem that's worldwide.
Beekeepers say a number of factors continue to affect the population, like pesticides, poor nutrition, disease, and pests like the varroa mite.
The diseases, pests that are being introduced almost on an annual basis into the United States that's causing problems for honeybees and other pollinators.
This is what's called an observation hive. Tignor takes it to schools, garden clubs, festivals, places where people are interested in honeybees. If you'd like to become a backyard beekeeper, he recommends that you first educate yourself on managing bees.
We do need more numbers of bees out there for pollination. That it is a good thing. It's a positive thing. And as I mentioned earlier, as long as they're responsible beekeepers, we call them beekeepers and not bee havers. Take care, make sure they stay alive and continue to prosper as opposed to just leaving them alone, because without your help, those bees aren't going to survive with those factors all against them.
Experts we interviewed acknowledge that even with the work of beekeepers, the overall bee population faces an uphill battle in terms of maintaining numbers. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Mark Martin, probably the bravest reporter I know. Coming up, a birthday blessing. A young man uses his special day to help others get their fill.
Finally, tonight, the best birthday gift is giving back. 29-year-old Adele Kimbrough had planned a birthday trip to Dubai, but he changed his mind and decided to give back instead.
That's right, Caitlin, and he did just that, wanting to pour into the people of his community by organizing a gas giveaway. Doling out $40 worth of gas to each driver to fill up, he spent $20,000 to put back into his community, one gas tank at a time. In all, 500 drivers benefited from the generous deed. Kimbrough saying he just wanted to bring hope and some relief to some people. And if I read correctly, he's also a prophet and a pastor.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mr. Kimbrough.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
See you tomorrow.